it together, and I was afraid Liz might be here and she would see that this was cut off, but I think my mother might have actually taken this photograph. But at any rate, that's Liz Adam. Anyway, I met Doug, and for you that don't know him, he's been teaching at the university since the 1950s, and he's taught how many thousands of people ornithology. So he's sort of like the father of modern ornithology. So after I met him, I was kind of launched forth on my own search, and I was looking, trying to figure out where I fit into all this. Okay, so I made a trip down to southern Louisiana, and I saw this interesting bird up there, and it looks kind of like an ivory-billed woodpecker, doesn't it? What do you guys think? It is an ivory-billed woodpecker. But of course I didn't see it there. But we were in a place where they had been there historically. So following the Charlie Wooten model, we can't check this one off. But it gets a question mark. But this is me in an early birding trip in southern Louisiana. And around that time, I met this person, Nancy Edelman. And she's from Virginia, and she had moved out to Arkansas, and we got together, and we made a few birding trips together and had fun. And she is interesting in that she's not interested in birds in terms of ornithology or academics. She just sort of enjoys them, which is always kind of a mystery to me, that she just gets a simple pleasure out of them. You know, she doesn't need to name them. She didn't need the Latin binomials, none of that stuff. She just kind of enjoyed it. And the result of our getting together resulted in this child. And the chapter called Yard Birds in the province deals with me trying to figure out what it meant to be a father, which for me was not easy. And I don't know if it's true of most men or not, but since Nancy carried Ariel all that time, she knew what it was about what was about to happen. Whereas I was blissfully unaware, and I was out trying to identify Lapland longspurs and western meadowlarks. And a person that we knew at that time, who would later figure really thoroughly in our lives, this woman, I've listed a whole bunch of attributes, the exterior attributes of this person. At the time I got to know her, this was Eleanor Johnson, and she became Ariel's godmother. And she was another person who kept a list of birds in the yard. Is it too loud? Not loud enough? Can you hear now? Okay. Sorry. Wow. Do I need to back up and start it all over again? Okay. So Eleanor Johnson kept track of birds in her yard, and spiders and snakes and all that kind of thing. Just had a real nice appreciation for birds, and Ariel loved that side of it, whereas Ariel was not taken by the Latin binomials. Okay, so this guy was a graduate student in the early 1980s. This is Mr. Check It Off, Charlie Wooten from South Carolina. He came to Fayetteville, and when he wasn't studying, well, according to Doug, he neglected his studies as a graduate student and instead went birding all the time. And I found myself severely attracted to doing that myself. And so we took off. I didn't have a vehicle then. I still had my bicycle only. And we did a lot of birding in his truck. And he's the subject of the chapter called Charlie. And Charlie's family built houses, and when Charlie's bird watching finally got him in a bunch of trouble, and he went back to South Carolina. Well, that's not really what happened, but he got sick actually. But he sent me this bumper sticker, and well, it's interesting, right? Okay, so this guy, I got to know this guy too. And when Ariel was born, we were living upstairs in a house not too far from here, and Richard was in the house there too, and he was making etchings. And his he was inspired by natural things that he saw around him, just things like butterflies, cicadas, that sort of thing, and he made hand-colored etchings and was selling them up on the square, and I got to know him, and we wound up making a lot of field trips together. And another interesting artistic influence in my life, this is one of his etchings. These are Savannah sparrows, a common winter bird here, and it had and continues to have a lot of influence on me. His, the way he takes what he sees outdoors and creates pieces of artwork that seem to have a lot of Richard in them, and they seem to have a lot of the natural history, what we're seeing outdoors. And he's the subject of the chapter called Richard. I guess that comes as a big shock, huh? And what I find very interesting is when I first got to know Richard, he was just making the etchings, and I was real fascinated by his abilities as an artist and the fact that he really enjoyed the outdoors. But as I got to know him, I found out that he actually grew up in Africa. His parents were missionaries in Africa, and recently, as I talked about in the chapter, Richard's been studying Swahili, relearning Swahili that he knew as a youngster. Is that right, Richard? Yeah. And so you hear Swahili in Fayetteville. So who would have thought? So at some place along the way, having a child, I had to take up some kind of a profession that paid. It came as a great shock to me as a 40-year-old male. And I've been fascinated for a long time by an endangered bird called red-cockaded woodpecker. And a great opportunity came along to study red-cockaded woodpeckers for a master's degree, and then to go to work for the Forest Service, actually helping to manage the recovery of a red-cockaded woodpecker population. And along the way, I met some very interesting people, and that's covered in the chapter called Woodpecker Business. That's what it's about. And this is me when I was in graduate school. See, I was already getting gray hair then, and I was just in graduate school then, and that's my boss, Warren Montague, who was actually the person who handled a lot of the work and was and is still the Ouachita National Forest Program Manager for red-cockaded woodpecker recovery, and a very fine job he's done. However, he's very conservative, I'm very liberal, and that did lead to some conflict. And part of the problem probably is that things like this appeal to me, whereas they don't appeal to people that are more literal. Like, when we saw, this was up in Benton County, when we saw this pink flamingo out in a snowstorm, yes, I really did wonder what it was thinking. So, okay, I know you guys want your money back for the books you bought tonight. And I really enjoy birds like the robins. Here the robins are enjoying amber honeysuckle, which is a very, it's a non-native, highly invasive species that's crowding out all kinds of natives. But God, the robins love them. And I'm afraid if we get rid of all the amber honeysuckle and all the Japanese honeysuckle, and we get rid of all the privet, that we won't have any birds left in northwest Arkansas. Okay, I see people saying, oh, don't talk like that. So, you wonder what the birds say when we're out there. Like, we just make the assumption that we're the ones that are doing all the thinking and talking, right, when we're out looking at birds. Well, these are some mallards that were at Lake Atalanta recently, and they were obviously talking about something, right? And they were swimming away from me, so I figured I knew what they were talking about. And this is a song sparrow. And this is a snipe. You guys all know that there really are snipes, right? Everybody that holds up your hand knows that there really are snipe. There really are snipe. And you thought ducks slept, right, when their heads are tucked. Take a close look at that picture. Do you see what I see? Okay, this is a male and female ringneck duck, and they got their eyes on you-know-who, and watch it all the time, even though they seem to be resting, and they are. And when I was out recently, in the process of doing my research for a book like this, I was out looking at, these are mallards, and there's a hooded merganser and a male-female hooded merganser in the back. There's the male, and there's the female. And I was looking at these birds, and it was a fairly close look. And this guy pulled up next to me in a very big, intimidating pickup truck, and he said, "I don't want you taking pictures of my cows." And I said, "I'm not taking pictures of your cows, I'm taking pictures of your ducks." And he just left. And so I wrote something about this and posted it to the Arbird list, and I got more responses from that post than anything I've ever written since 2002 or whenever that list started. And I'm still getting comments from people, and it's because I missed a very important point. And that is that people are very sensitive now about rustling. And I hadn't even ever thought about that when I'm out there with my big telescope sticking out the window out in the middle of nowhere looking at ponds, that people are real sensitive, and they're sensitive about other things like that. Like one person wrote me and said, they're probably doing something illegal and they think you're collecting data. And one guy thought that I was checking to see if farmers were putting poultry litter on the fields, which is restricted in Benton County. And this guy, I don't know, I guess he was concerned about his cattle. But at any rate, I've probably heard from 20 people, and I'd say 18 of them have said I'm stupid, that I didn't ask first. And my response to that was, well, you know, when they take pictures of my house from airplanes and helicopters for Google Earth, they don't ask my permission to look on my property. And Amy Edie, who's here, said that I should put some wings on the side of my car so people would know. Isn't that what it was? Yeah, something like that. So people would know that I'm a harmless bird person. Well, there are lots of things that really stimulate the interest. The physical parts of this book, talking just about the birds.